Thank you for waiting and welcome again to the ISGAN Academy webinar of today. The title of the webinar of today is Optimizing Participation of Renewable Generation in Multiple Electricity Markets, Smart4RES Vision, Opportunities and Roles of Forecasting. This webinar is hosted by ISGAN. ISGAN, the International Smart Grid Action Network, is the short name for the International Energy Agency Technology Collaboration Program. ISGAN is also an initiative of the Clean Energy Ministerial, formally established in 2011. ISGAN creates a strategic platform to support high-level government attention and action for the development and deployment of smarter and greener and cleaner electricity grids around the world. ISGAN currently consists of 27 contracted parties. The nominated representatives form the executive committee, headed by the Presidium and assisted by 2 co-secretariats and the operating agents of ISGAN. ISGAN's vision is to accelerate progress on key aspects of smart grid policy, technology, and investments. Through voluntary participation by governments in specific projects and programs. Its activities focus on five principal areas: policy standards and regulation, finance and business models, technology system development, workforce skill and knowledge, user and consumer engagement. ISGAN facilitates dynamic knowledge sharing, technical assistance, peer review, and project coordination among its contracting parties. The ISGAN value proposition relies on conferences and workshops, policy and technology briefs, discussion and technical paper, casebooks, and webinars. With the ISGAN Academy activity offer to the ISGAN community means of rational and efficient continuous technical skill update in the field of smart grids. The Academy is proposed as a set of e-learning core modules dealing with the entire value chain of smart grid. Fundamentals and reading modules, webinars organized or co-hosted with the Clean Energy Solutions Center. The webinar of today, hosted by ISGAN and ISGAN Academy, concerns the optimizing participation of renewable generation in multiple electricity markets, the Smart4RES vision, the opportunities and the roles of forecasting. In electricity markets, the errors associated to renewable production forecasting led to the imbalance penalties when actual delivery production deviates from bids. Optimization strategies requiring multiple prediction have been proposed to minimize these penalties. However, having so many predictions represents a cost for operators and can be a source of inefficiency by cumulating forecasting errors. In this context, Smart4RES proposes optimization methods for trading tools, considering multiple market opportunities, high-resolution forecasts, and prescriptive analytics. The speakers of today are Matthias Lange from EMSYS, Camal from ARMINES, and Pierre Pinson from DTU. Please use the question and answer tool to pose the questions. The speaker will answer at the end of the presentation. The recordings of the webinar will be available through the ISGAN YouTube channel. Now, I leave the floor to the presenter, to Matthias. Enjoy the webinar. Thanks for joining.
Yes, good afternoon to everybody. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'll just try to share my screen. So I hope everybody can see this now. Yeah, the title was already mentioned. We are here in one of the webinars in the Smart4RES project. I will briefly introduce what this is. And then I will also talk about the current status of virtual power plants, which are a current technology to integrate renewable energies into electricity markets. And then Simon will highlight the role of forecasting in trading strategies for renewables. And Pierre will talk about the current challenges and necessary focus areas for renewables and electricity markets. Maybe maybe I'll start with Smart4RES. So very briefly, in a nutshell, Smart4RES is a project on forecasting. As many of you know, the forecasting of the power output of wind farms and solar plants is a mature technology that has been developed over the last years and has now is in a commercial service and used by different actors, by traders. So this is established at the moment, but given the growing share of renewables, it has to be further improved. And not only the forecasting technology, but also the integration of the forecasting results, so the interpretation and the decision-making based on forecasting into the market processes. And this is the topic of Smart4RES. So the vision is that science and industry work together to achieve an improvement in accuracy of forecasting, but also in the integration, this embedding of forecasting into decision-making. And this is basically over the whole value chain. So this is on the right-hand side where we have sort of all the forecasting chain, starting from the data input over the weather modeling, integration into the markets, forecasting services, business, new data platforms, decision-making models for grids, and also electricity markets. All this is covered by Smart4RES. And we are now, with these webinars, we're introducing sort of the one aspect of this value chain, which is the market integration today. And today's webinar stands in a series of webinars which we have already done in the past. So this is the 5th webinar, and there are more to come. So here we are in volume 4, and we had already introductory webinars and talked about the weather prediction. And now we are in this market opportunity webinar, and the next one will be on storage systems and further on electricity markets. Smart4RES has a very strong consortium from 12 partners from 6 countries. Today, we have contributions by Pierre from DTU in Denmark and Simon from ARMINES Paritech in France. And I am one of the managing directors of Energy Meteor Systems. And my background, by the way, is I did my PhD in wind power forecasting. So I've also started this some time ago. And the role of an SME is, of course, to look at the application from the application side. And so we're doing also some research to improve our forecasting technology, but we're also providing a data platform and some sort of technical platforms to make this happen. And one very important system, for one key technology for this, is a virtual power plant. So that's why in this part, I will now introduce what a virtual power plant is and how it is used, and give a current status. So what the status is now, which is a little bit outside the Smart4RES project. So it's not an academic problem; it's a product, so to say. But it highlights what the state of technology is and how it is used, and why it is important to integrate renewables into electricity markets. And as a short reminder, here is a list of the electricity markets that are accessible to renewables and are sort of used. So that there are significant trading volumes that are developed over these markets. And the most important one is day-ahead market. Depending on the country, this is slightly different, but most countries in Europe are connected to EPOC Spot, which is an organization which supports trading. Sorry. And this day-ahead market has a specific auction. So there's one price which is fixed once a day, and this is valid for the next day. So the trading is from today to tomorrow. If things change over the day, then the intraday market, which has a different price finding algorithm or mechanism, which is continuous trading, the intraday market is then used, for example, to trade differences between the day-ahead market and the intraday market, which is very important, for example, for traders of renewables. And one Also, one market that is addressed by renewables is balancing power. This is normally organized by the transmission operators, but the entities who bid into the markets are operators or traders of renewables. For example, tertiary reserve is used or is offered by wind farms. I'll come later to this, but we're also heading for something where reactive power will also be available through wind farms. So the ancillary services markets will also see larger volumes with a contribution by renewables. And then we have flexibility markets, and this is at least for many countries, including Germany. It's a more upcoming topic, but in the UK we have the first steps in this direction. And as you see, to summarize this, these are short-term markets. So this is a typical for renewables. It's good to be as close to the delivery as possible. Talking about virtual power plants, our understanding here of a virtual power plant is more the technical side of it as an IT platform to bring together a large number of decentralized assets and into one portfolio. And we're talking about the technical platform and the intelligence on it. So the algorithms for optimization, for example. This is our understanding in this project. And in contrast to this, you can also understand the virtual power plant more as the aggregator or the business models to put this together. I don't know why the slides are changing. So what you see here in this picture is this idea that the virtual power plant brings together a lot of decentralized assets, solar, wind, so renewables, but also hydropower or also storage, batteries, but also flexible consumers, substations. So this is a wide range of assets. The idea is to collect a lot of data to see what's going on, but also to have remote control of the power output. So, for example, to control wind farms for specific reasons, or to control the entire portfolio for specific reasons. This enables the aggregator, such a virtual power plant, enables the aggregator, the user, the power company or the trading company, to access these different markets. So the markets that I introduced before. Day ahead, intraday, all of these markets can be used because the virtual power plant is the platform for it. And here is one sort of process covered by a virtual power plant where you see all these technical and optimization aspects. We have decentralized assets providing data, real-time data. We have forecasts, so what will happen in the future, maybe from different providers to have a meter forecast. Very important things like availability information, so maintenance or outages. And then we have an optimization module, which is which includes, for example, feedback from the market prices, or information on imbalances. So this is the connection point where we have some sort of business intelligence in the virtual power plant. And then we have the scheduling controller who can send out remote control signals to the units to change their power output. And all this works in real-time mode. So this is a sort of continuous process so that you, for example, can serve trading schedules on a 15-minute basis for the intraday market. And I have two examples. One is here, the use of virtual power plants to react to negative prices. So this is normally in an intraday situation, but can also be day ahead, so that a trader sees there's a negative price and then he has to control his portfolio and curtail, for example, the production to avoid these phases with negative prices. And what you see here is a sort of screenshot from the virtual power plant. You see this axis is power output. It's a very large wind power portfolio. Maximum installed power is 8 gigawatts. Then we have here about 12 hours of time. The white curve is what the portfolio really did, and the yellow curve is the prediction according to the weather situation. And if we look at this here, the weather situation would suggest that there's a high power output all the time, but there was a reduction given by this light gray schedule. And this was activated by a trader because he observed negative prices, and it was good for from a financial point of view to reduce the power output to save revenue. And so he sent remote control commands to the portfolio to curtail down. Last example here is providing negative balancing power by a wind farm. So this is a wind farm. Now we have a shorter time frame. This is only 1.5 hours, or 1 hour, and we have a 24 megawatt wind farm. And this is the sort of schedule. So there was enough wind for the wind farm to operate at nearly installed power. But here was an activation of balancing power, and here another one. So this is where the TSO asked for a tertiary reserve, and then we see that the virtual power plant sent a curtailment schedule. The wind farm followed this. So this is the way how wind farms and other renewable energy units works also for solar, and can participate in the ancillary markets and the balancing power markets. And this is the situation as it is now. And now we're going to show what will be possible in the future, what is under investigation and development in Smart4RES. So I'll hand over to Simon now. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthias. I will share my screen. And it should be now in full screen mode. So Matthias showed that predictions are important for the operation of the virtual power plant. So what I propose to you for this section of the webinar is to know a bit more how to actually provide this prediction. So how to forecast the production of a renewable virtual power plant, or VPP. And then we'll see what's the role of the forecast in the modeling chain of trading this VPP production into electricity markets. So let's start by defining the operational timeline of this trading activity. So as already shown by Matthias, we consider that our VPP trades in the energy market, but also has the capacity to trade on the reserve market. Reserve markets cover multiple different ancillary services. I won't cover these differences in detail. We just consider here a generic reserve product. So what happens in this timeline is that trading positions have to be taken at a horizon of the day ahead. So the VPP operator has to trade on the day ahead energy market, but also on the increasing importance of the reserve, which is also operated at day ahead. And to do that, to optimize this trading position, we will need a forecast of the VPP production, but also a forecast of the market quantities. So basically the different prices on the market. Then on the intraday, the VPP operator, sorry for that, the VPP operator will have the opportunity, depending on the market, to update its trading position. And for that also a forecast is really helpful before delivering the energy and the reserve. And this requires the real-time VPP control that Matthias showed previously. The last stage is that we compute the revenues, and these revenues integrate the penalties that are faced by the VPP when there are deviations between its offers and the measured production. What we have to bear in mind is that forecasting errors increase with the horizon. The further you look into the future, the harder it is to predict accurately. And actually, the accuracy of the forecast of a renewable VPP is the first challenge that it will face. Just to be clear, here we consider a VPP which controls only variable renewable energy sources. And so if we want to base our offer on the day-ahead energy market, we have to do that from a forecast of the total VPP production. You have an example here on the right-hand side. And actually, even with a good forecasting model, you will observe some deviations between the forecast and the observations. And these deviations will have a proportional impact on the penalties that will be based on the market. So the first objective here would be to reduce the forecasting errors of the VPP forecast. Then we've seen that the VPP has the capacity to offer not only on the energy, but also on the reserve market due to its increased size and smoother profiles. In the existing literature on the topic, the standard approach to do that require not anymore the deterministic forecast that we've seen before, but a probabilistic forecast which quantifies the uncertainty associated to this prediction. This is shown on the right-hand side here. So we need a probabilistic forecast of the VPP production with the predicted expected distribution of the power levels. And under some simple assumptions, the optimal reserve offer is actually directly computed from this probabilistic forecast. It forms a quantile of the distribution, and we'll show that in more details after. But here we get already a second objective. So forecast the VPP production, but quantifying the uncertainty in a probabilistic manner. Now, how are we going to do that? So I mentioned briefly the aggregation and the smoother profile. So you probably know that if you aggregate multiple units, the profile production will be smoother. But there is another challenge that is less known. If you consider this renewable VPP, which aggregates only variable renewable sources, well, we have to take into account the contribution of each of these energy sources in the VPP, and this contribution will vary throughout the day. So what we want to have in the end is what is shown in the red box in the center. So a probabilistic forecast of the total sum production at the VPP level, which is measured in red here. So one way to do that is to build a direct regression model based on the data from the VPP, so weather forecast at the site level, recent measurements, and directly derive a probabilistic forecast, which is materialized here by these prediction intervals in gray levels. Another approach could be, okay, let's first forecast the contribution of each energy source into this aggregation, into this virtual VPP, into the VPP. So what we would see here is that the PV, for instance, would have a major contribution at noon, and then the wind and the hydro would have increasing contribution during the night. But this is not sufficient. If we want to forecast the total production, we need to add a dependence model to take into account the dynamic contribution of these sources. And I will show results of these two approaches, either direct or separate by lower levels of the VPP. The relationship between the input data and the observation of total VPP production is quite complex. So it's better to use machine learning in this context. They provide good results. Actually, you can forecast this VPP production with uncertainty with off-the-shelf solutions. So consider, for instance, a probabilistic version of the random forest, which is quantile regression forest, and you already obtain good results. In Smart4RES, we want to go further and develop advanced machine learning approaches. I can cite one, which is convolutional neural network. It's interesting because it can filter progressively the dependencies between these energy sources and sites. And our first results show that this CNN improves the forecasting score by 15% compared to the state-of-the-art QRF. But it's likely that the system operators will require a high level of reliability for the reserve provision. And in that case, we will need to develop specific models on the lowest quantiles of the distribution. Why the lowest quantiles? Because we want a conservative assessment of our forecasts. We don't want to have less observed production than the reserve offer. And at these lower quantiles, we have two options. One is to adapt these regression models I've just presented. And the other one is to rely on statistical models that we know behave well on these extremely low quantiles. Okay, so now we dispose of these forecasting tools, and we can integrate them all to form a complete forecast-based trading model chain. This is what has been done here. So we use this probabilistic forecast of VPP production plus a standard forecasting deterministic of all the prices on the market. And we derive optimally the reserve offer as a quantile that I've said before, which depends on the prices of each market. And what the model is able to do, it is able to identify the periods in red here on the left-hand side where reserve is actually profitable. It makes sense from an economical sense. And this amount of reserve is adapted depending on the level of expected production, but also the moments when reserve is more profitable than energy. The outcome is that the average revenue is increased by 5% compared to a base case where we just sell energy with this VPP. Another approach, if you want to minimize the risk of not being able to provide reserve, is not to base your offer on the prices, but rather on a constant, very low quantile of the distribution. So in this case, obviously, you reduce your revenue that's expected, you miss some opportunities, but the advantage is that you really limit the frequency of under-fulfilled reserve, here up to 0% frequency. Now, at this point, someone might say, is it really worth to improve the forecasting of this VPP production? Does it really translate into better trading results? Well, actually, we will analyze this question with the similar problem, just with the two approaches that I've presented before. So approach one, direct reduction of total production, and approach two, prediction at the sub-levels of VPP, prediction by source, plus a dependence model to obtain the total production. And we'll see the difference in trading by a stochastic optimization model. So what do we obtain? Actually, we see that the second approach gives a more realistic forecast. So the forecast here is given in terms of scenarios, trajectories of the VPP production. And we see that the approach, which works separately by energy source first and then adding some dependence, is more accurate. We improve the accuracy by 15%. Then the question is, do we do better in terms of trading? Yes. This approach improves the worst case revenue, the conditional value at risk, by 20%. So in that case, improving the forecasting accuracy of the VPP reduces the risk of facing large financial losses. This is, I don't want to say that this is automatic. If you look for an automatic link between forecasting accuracy and the value in your applications, you can consider an interesting solution, which is called value-oriented forecasting, where you jointly optimize both forecasting and application. And if you are interested, we can discuss further this point. This is my last slide. So we've seen that forecasting is an important input for trading in the energy and reserve market, but still, it's you see that the modeling chain is complex. And in Smart4RES, we want to investigate alternatives to streamline, to simplify this model chain. And one way to do this is to develop a solution, data-driven solution based on the prescriptive analytics approach. So what we do is we optimize directly this data-driven model based on an approximation of the trading costs and the learning of weights which give importance to past trading situations according to the data we have available. And this is interesting because on simple case, such as the trading on a single market, energy market, for instance, we have the same revenue than the traditional forecast and optimize approach. And we'll show you in a further webinar that you can even tackle more complex cases, such as constraint problems with storage, for instance. And now I'll stop here and I will let the floor to Pierre Pinson for higher level visions of challenges and new approaches for RES forecasting.
Thank you very much, Simon. As Matthias was mentioning, and also Simon pointed at that, in this project, Smart4RES, what we want to do is really to go from all the way on one side to all the way on the other side. So really looking at the operational solution, but also looking at the new research challenges that we see ahead of us. And we try also to have this kind of ready-made solutions like Simon was mentioning now, going towards prescriptive analytics, value-oriented forecasting, etc. In this last part of the webinar, what I really would like to do is to open up in terms of some of these challenges. And I'm sure some of you will say, okay, I see that, I know that it's out there, but not many people have actually proposed solutions going in this direction. So first of all, I want to go back to the basic aspects of the definition of the problem we're looking at when we do trading with renewables. I'll zoom in on the uncertainty aspects, and I'll explain why we actually still have quite some more work to do with uncertainty. And finally, I would like to discuss this idea of price maker and population-aware approaches, which I feel need to have much more focused in the future. So yeah, so there's this classical problem that never goes away. That's really the basic issue with trading. There's two dimensions, right? There's the price per units of energy that you're actually going to produce with your wind farm or your portfolio of wind farm or virtual power plant with different sources times the quantity, right? So it's a price times a quantity, and the price might be a bit complicated because it can combine some energy price and ancillary service price, and you may have some penalty also on top of that, but still conceptually it's just a price times a quantity, And that makes that a lot of the focus in research has been on price forecasting and on quantity forecasting. And then we have this optimization or this approach in general to try to combine everything to make optimal solutions. So on the quantity side, the literature, the focus on renewable energy forecasting has been huge over the last 5 years. It was already intense over the last previous 5 years, sorry. And it was, already picking up very strongly also over the last 20 years, you could say overall. On the market price side, there's really a regain of interest, you could say, and a lot of hard work going on. Because on the price side, there's many aspects to consider. There's the energy price, there's the system length, is the system going to be long or short? And eventually, what we care about is this plot you see on the right side. If you talk with trading companies, most often they say, what they want is a model of the stack, of the supply curve. Because somehow they know that you're going to slide on this curve, and at this point where it's going to cross with the demand, that's going to reveal the price, right? So you want to understand this curve too. So we're going to zoom in into these different type of aspects now. And first, if you make certain assumptions on the way you trade, what you care about is just to know what's going to be the crossing point. You want a single value or probabilistic assessment on this value of the equilibrium price. And then you will use that as input to some optimization for scheduling your assets, or at least to try to hedge in terms of your uncertainty and the exposure in the market. And there's been a lot of activity over the last 10 years. I was saying, there's a regain in interest, or maybe, I don't know, it's always been there, but it has increased some more. And there are very good groups around the world. I mean, I could cite colleagues in Poland, Rafael Veron and his colleagues. This plot was taken by some colleagues in Portugal, from some colleagues in Portugal, so Ricardo Bessa and his colleagues. And we see a lot of nice things going towards probabilistic forecasting, very high resolution forecasting in intraday markets, thinking of new type of machineries, new type of features as inputs, and even the dynamic aspects of the forecast updates. Some people have been looking at how you could be strategic in terms of using forecast information, knowing that you're going to have some updates in the future, knowing that you care about a point further away in the future during the day. So there's a lot to do there, but in a way, it's only one side of the problem, or it may not be the optimal input for all the type of trading strategies you want to consider. And really, as I said, the point that we care about is this stack, it's this supply curve. And some people already started working on that nearly 10 years ago. And now I think there's quite a few methods out there. There's this inverse optimization approach proposed by Ruiz, Pertzimas, and Conejo. There's been this Bayesian estimation proposed by Mitridati and myself. And really the idea is to be able to reveal this curve, the supply curve, the stack, based on limited information that we can grasp a bit every day from market clearing. In some countries in the world, you can have this information eventually. In some others, you cannot. So these methods then are very useful. If you want to trade as a price maker or to be aware about population effect, you need the full stack. You cannot just have a single price forecast as input to your trading strategy and your optimization. All right, so when we consider then the probabilistic aspects of trading under uncertainty, we know these classical results, and Simon was already looking at some extension of it when you want to trade both energy and reserve. But the basic idea is to have this optimal quantile that we trace. And so that's why we care about probabilistic forecast, because then when we know which one is the optimal quantile, we just pick it from the probabilistic forecast, and this is what we trade. But somehow, many people, me included, I would say, we have trusted a bit too much what we can do in terms of probabilistic forecasting. And we have diagnostic tools allowing to say if the forecasts are good or not, but we can never say if a given forecast, probabilistic forecast, is good or not. And so if you're not sure about your uncertainty information, somehow you're not even sure also that the quantile you're going to pick is a good one or not. And there's been some recent idea that's very popular in optimization under uncertainty, distributionally robust optimization, which is actually made for that. What do you do if you have an uncertainty description, but you're not actually sure this is the right one? It should be close to that, but it's not the right one. So this is some of the things we investigate in in Smart4RES how we can actually trade under uncertainty when we are not even sure we have the right description of uncertainty. The other aspects I was mentioning is that in most cases, we assume we're price takers. It's so easier, you know, it's so natural. And for a long time, it made sense. You have a single wind farm, you have a small portfolio of wind farms or PV, and you don't think you're going to affect market outcome. So a price taker is someone that doesn't affect market outcome by his or her action on the market. But actually, we should accept the fact that we are all price makers. At the end of the day, the price is revealed due to a combination of actions from all the agents involved. And you might have more of an impact on the price discovery than what you think. So if you're aware of the fact there is some price maker in the game, you included or you as a group, then you should account for it. And there are some works that were already published more than 10 years ago that say, okay, if you're really big yourself and you're a price maker, either in the day-ahead market or in the balancing market, what would you do? And we need this full stack, as I mentioned. And the point somehow is to understand how by making an offer, you will shift the stack, either left or right. You know, if you go a bit too long or a bit too short with your offer, it will impact the price. And then you have to account for it in your strategy. There are two basic ideas you can use there, depending on your, let's say, how advanced you want to go with optimization and computational cost. Quadratic programming, it's actually quite easy and quite cheap to consider, but it might not be very good if you move a lot the stack by your action, because quadratic programming can only consider some very local shifting in the stack. If you have some more advanced views on how you can be a price maker, you need to use bi-level optimization and the kind of stack revealing methods that I mentioned before. And there's been two main publications on this topic by Baringo and Conejo and by Marco Zugno and co-authors also 8 years ago. The thing, though, that we noticed is that actually people who published on this price maker proposal were quite criticized. You know, they were told, but you're never a price maker alone. But looking at wind farms, you know, you're price maker as a group. Looking at solar power plants, you're also price maker as a group. So you might think your assets are too small to affect the market, but there are dependencies in the weather, dependencies in the forecast, in space and in time, dependencies between the forecasters, and even dependency in the education of the traders. They might all have been attending courses, I don't know, at DTU, at Mines Paris Tech, etc. And that makes these dependencies render the group of assets a price maker group. And that's why we need to develop this method to be population aware in the electricity market. There's been a very recent paper from people at MIT where they look at these kind of aspects, but there's not really something out there that is, let's say, really advanced and really showing what would be the difference if you trade being population aware. So to conclude the key message for our presentation, I hope we gave you a clear message about this renewables in electricity market, about portfolio of renewables and what they can do. And from the first part from Matthias, I think you heard that all this idea with virtual power plants is a mature technology, and it's really something that's not about research discussion. It's out there, you know, it's being used in practice, and there's lots of potential to improve trading of renewables in electricity market based on this kind of concept. Then there's a lot of solutions that are already out there, you know, for jointly trading energy in reserve, value-oriented forecasting, prescriptive analytics. So you can already consider this much more advanced approach for operations, and there are real benefits to do that. And after the last part of the presentation, I was insisting on the fact that there's a lot of research problems still out there, and we have to consider how the market will evolve in the future when we have more and more renewables. So the uncertainty is key, but are we really good at understanding this uncertainty and using it? Are we price makers or not? I mean, I'm not even sure I can tell you how much of a price maker you are. It's very difficult to assess. And then what are the methods to trade as a price maker or being population aware in terms of the price making effects? So thank you very much. We've put here some further readings that you can use if you can access the slides or by relooking at the videos. And finally, I would like to thank you. And we're obviously happy to discuss with you if you have some questions, ideas you would like to share, etc. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pierre. Thank you, Matthias. Thank you, Simon. And now we can move to the question and answer session. So now we have several questions. So I will start from the first one in chronological order. The audience ask if distribution system operators participate in the market, and if you have any example, like any country in which it happens.
I can give a general answer, and maybe Matthias and Simon have some specific answers. So it's more for regulatory problems. So there are regions in the world where DSOs are supposed to be independent, so system operators like the transmission system operators, and then they shouldn't go in the electricity market. So we have that, for instance, in Denmark, where DSOs are thought, okay, maybe we could trade flexibility in electricity market. Actually, they are not allowed. When you operate a system, you have to be out of the market. But I think there are some other countries where regulation is different, and this could happen. So I don't know if Matthias and Simon have some extra or comments about that.
So I don't know about this DSOs who are really participating in the market as a kind of company, but here in Germany we have something new which is called Redispatch 2.0. It's in the framework of integrating renewables into redispatch processes, and this is where DSOs get very much involved into integrating renewables, but in their own world, in the sort of grid operators world. So they face basically the same problems of forecasting and also remote controlling these units, but it's a sort of, as Pierre pointed out, it's a regulated area which is given by laws and by the federal regulator.
Okay, thanks for the answer. And the second question regards the techniques that you use for forecasting. So the question is, please tell what techniques are actually prevalent for forecasting the demand and price in energy industry. Do they actually use machine learning based algorithms? If yes, which ones?
I can give a quick answer, and maybe, you know, it's a bit difficult to speak for everybody that's out there. You know, there are many research labs that propose services. There are many companies like Matthias' company, Energy Method Systems. So I cannot know for everybody, but in principle, I mean, everything is being used today. You know, some companies will use machine learning and more classical, I don't know, linear regression, multiple linear regression as a portfolio of potential methods, and they will just adapt to what their clients prefer, right? They might have some criteria of interpretability or, I don't know, some local computation that makes that one or the other is preferred. So my opinion is actually today, everything is being used in practice, all the methods we know, except maybe the very cutting edge, you know, recent advances in machine learning, but otherwise, I mean, it's catching up very fast.
Yes, that's also my impression. I can only agree. And of course, this wording, machine learning, or neural networks, that is artificial intelligence. Of course, this is involved. What I see is that these technologies are available to everybody now, so it's very easy to use these technologies. But what I also see is that it makes sense to think about the input. So not to train something, it's good to make up your mind, or I think this is the key, to make up your mind what you use as input and what you're aiming at, and maybe also not have a black box training. So this is what I think differs then successful setups from not so successful setups.
Yeah, I also agree. What we've been doing in our research center is also looking at, you know, new type of prices which have been less investigated before, such as prices on the ancillary services market, for instance. And on these types of market, this is quite challenging to have good results. And in some cases, some simple models are a good first shot instead of complex machine learning. So first, let's try to use the good inputs, understand well how the market works, and the question of the machine learning comes after.
Okay, thank you very much. There is another question to Simon. The audience asks if you please comment on the practical implementation issues of CNN-based forecasting methods.
Yes, so it's true that actually CNN, convolutional neural networks, they were usually primarily used for classification. But actually, if you look at the structure, is quite powerful, and it's actually shown to perform well in a regression framework as well. So one first thing you have to look at is to see if the structure, the architecture of the network has to be changed. So in our work, we've seen that, for instance, the pooling layers sometimes reduce too much the information. They create some losses. They are very useful for classification, but for regression, maybe you can discard that, or at least try different architectures without this pooling layer. Then before that, you have to be careful on how you declare your and configure your input data. So we spend quite a lot of time of arranging the data in terms of the appropriate channels. For instance, if you want to do multiple horizons, you can consider horizons as multiple channels and so on. Not mentioning the pre-processing, that is very important. And the last point I would say is to be sure that the training is effective. So this means looking at the various losses that you can implement and monitor that the network is efficiently learning. One last point, but it's more research, is you can investigate different types of filters which can help you filter both, for instance, in the spatial and temporal scales. But if you're interested, we can give you further references.
Thank you, Simon. We have another question related to the techniques. Can ML methods and optimization arrive naturally to a market manipulation in which the best technique for a price maker is to hold some energy to make it rise?
So I can, I'm not sure I fully understood the first part, but I got most of it. Yeah, no, so I mean, this is a classical, you could say, approach to being strategic in electricity market as a price maker, where you try to withhold capacity. You can always try to play in the market, be strategic in quantity and price. But actually, this kind of behavior is gonna, I'm not sure it's going to be so valid and so possible to do these kind of things in the future, where you have many more agents in the market and so much uncertainty coming from renewables and all these complex dependencies and uncertainty. So actually, the way we are price makers, or we can be strategic in the market, is also to be rethought. The basic mechanics has not changed, about the supply and demand meeting, but still the way we can be strategic and get something out of it, it's going to become more complicated in the future with more renewables.
Thank you, Pierre. And the other question also is related to slide 12 of the Simon presentation and slide 30 of the PR presentation. And they ask if they say that a closed form formulation for the optimal reserve offer is shown. Is this 12. Valid? Yeah, in slide 12 and 30.
I don't think it's what 12.
No,
okay, anyway, yeah.
Wait, 21 probably. Yeah. No,
it was here.
It's okay. The one of the optimal quantile. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, this one. Yeah, I guess 22 and 39. All right.
Okay. And so.
Yes, maybe I can answer.
But what's the question though?
Yes, please.
Yeah, the question is this, I mean, this closed form valid if we assume that the settlement period of reserve and energy deviation happen in different time scale? Let's say 15 minutes for energy imbalance and 5 minutes for deviation of reserve.
Yes, so it's a very good question because it's true that at least this the most simple formulation of this optimal quantile, it comes from a problem which is called news vendor. So maybe Hamad is he actually knows that. And in this simple form, it's true that we assume that each market time unit is independent and that they should be with the same resolution. So actually, it's true that it's not, if you have a different settlement periods, it's not the classical case where you can apply readily the optimal quantile. Actually, there are several several works which have extended the news vendor problem, for instance, for multiple products. So you can actually derive another formula, which is not this one, but based on this one to solve the problem. But more generally, when we start to have these temporal constraints, then this analytical formulation is not found anymore, and we rely more on numerical optimization techniques.
Yeah, multi-stage stochastic programming would be what is needed for more general case, and there are also papers dating from 12 years ago, you could say, from Morales and others that shows its generalization. If it's some simple tweak in terms of not being fully synchronized or some price is valid for several periods, I think there's still hope to have some closed form solution. But at some point, maybe one could just let it go and just use this kind of multi-stage stochastic programming as a better tool.
Okay, thank you, Pierre. Thank you, Simon. There is another question to Simon. So, by using this type of strategy, calibrated based on historical data instead of an electricity market simulators, how you deal with the data drift concept? For example, change over time in the market structure. Additionally, these historical periods not cover the expected 100% VRI power systems that will bring significant change in market price reserves.
Yes, well, the short answer is we don't actually, but we can do in what I mean is these are methods that are well suited for short-term problems, So you do have data, recent data that you will update, and then you can optimize your offers for the next days, and you can do that on a rolling horizon. It's true that we don't incorporate any structural changes in the market, which will happen. One answer could be that when these changes happen, these short-term methods will be still valid, but your point is really important, actually. It's true that we need other methods which actually can anticipate how the prices will look like when renewable penetration will be a major player in the markets. It's actually also one of these aspects we've been working on in our group, how to generate some relevant time series of prices in the long term with the different scenarios with a higher renewable scenario. And maybe Pierre can come something to add.
Now, personally, I remember some very nice talk by some colleagues where they said that the most important structural break or drift that may happen, you can never have thought of them, because this might be a political decision, a technical breakthrough with new assets that completely change the game. So as much as I agree with Simon that we should do this kind of thing to try to think of how the price dynamics and the market dynamics could be in the future, I'm afraid that it will never get us ready for the true, structural break, the true disruptive changes that may come.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Okay, there is another question to Simon. What resolution are usually expected for RES virtual power plant forecasts? Also regarding ML methods, what mechanisms are used to update these models when new data arrives? What inputs are relevant, for example, SCADA, NWP?
Yes. So about the resolution, I guess, yes, it's true that we hinted to high resolution. So actually, what is done usually today is the forecasts. What I showed in the talk is day ahead horizon. So the temporal resolution of the forecast is somewhere between let's say 5 and 30 minutes. The standard would be 5 to 15 minutes to be aligned with the different settlement periods and expected variabilities that we can have. And obviously, when you move to intraday horizons, then you can go to the minute resolution or even below. And actually, that's one point that we will develop in Smart4RES. Starting from the weather data, actually, the weather data usually what is operationally available is hourly resolution, but with our partners Météo France and so WIFL, we'll dispose of numerical weather predictions which will have natively the temporal resolution of 4 to 5 minutes, so which is really interesting. And WIFL is even able to model variability below the minute, so at the level of some seconds. So we are working on extracting the value out of this high resolution data. So regarding the machine learning models, so to update these models, well, you know, we have different kind of approaches. One which is quite popular and works quite well is transfer learning. So already, you know, reuse a pre-trained model that you had on previous tasks, on previous data, and just update it, not retrain everything again. We also have the opportunity to use online techniques on some models, not on the deep learning ones, but on simpler ones. And regarding the inputs, yes, the ones that you cite are relevant, of course. So the SCADA, the recent measurements at a very high resolution, if you want to forecast the next minute, for instance, that's needed. But we also have plenty of other data sources that are relevant for the VPP. Think of irradiance maps derived by satellites. We have our partner DLR, who develops a regional forecast of the solar irradiance based on sky cameras. So the idea, thunderstorm based on information carried by lightning data. So the idea is to try and grab all the data you can use. Then obviously focus on those which are really relevant for the problem at hand. If you want just to improve the average error or improve some specific conditions which are sometimes more interesting, you know, like partially clouded conditions, for instance.
Thank you, Simon. There is a shortcut question now. The audience asks, what tools should I use for RES forecasting, especially machine learning techniques?
I think,
yes.
yeah, I was going to say, I think we kind of answered earlier, but it was for demand and for load. I mean, I would turn the question in another way. Should you do it yourself or try to just get forecasts from experts? I think one of the things we've noticed is also it's quite a lot of work, right? At some point to develop your own machinery and really try to, select the data, be sure you use them the right way, etc. So I think today the right question is, do I want to develop my own tool or do I want to ask people to provide forecasts? I'm not saying you should not develop your own tool, but because after I said there's so many methods one could try, and I've been organizing with colleagues different forecast competitions, and there's not a single winner. So the best solutions might be different for different situations, for different locations, for different things. And I mean, vendors or people who have done that for many years, they will have this experience and can bring it somehow to the table. So I think it's up to people. It depends if we are students, researchers, and we want to do the development, or if we are simple users and just need to have a good forecast. But in principle, any method, I even have situations in Argentina and some funny places in China where linear regression could not be beat with some very simple wind speed forecast as inputs. So, I mean, really anything is possible.
Yes.
I don't know if Matthias wants to. Yeah.
Yes, I fully agree. So it's really the question: So if you ask about tools, if you want to use them in an academic sense, or if you really want to rely on the forecast, so they're commercial vendors, and I'm not only saying this because we are a commercial vendor of forecasts, because this also relates to the next question. It's really a big data issue. So you have to collect a lot of data from the machines. You have to consider outages. You have to consider availabilities. You have to consider curtailments. And then you have the input data, for example, from the numerical weather services as input, where the state of the art is to have a meter forecast. So not only one weather model, which is contributing to the power forecast in the end, but many different weather models to have a sort of choice, or to have a blending or a weighted average, however you call it. And to organize this and to get all this data and to make this a 24/7 service, which it should be, because the market is operating on a 24/7 mode, is very complicated. So especially in this second question, the accuracy of the forecast very much depends on the availability of data. And if you have shortest term forecast, next 5 minutes, for example, which is the standard in the United States, where you have a 5-minute redispatch market, then you have, of course, also a big impact of the numerical weather forecast, but the availability, so a small delay in the production data, is also very, very, very important. And this is what you have to make sure if you want to have a good forecast. And this is what you normally do with a commercial vendor.
Thank you, Matthias. Thank you, Pierre. So we can move to the next question. The one regarding whether forecasting has been already answered, and also I suggest to watch the 2 previous webinars made in collaboration with Smart4RES, because these 2 webinars were focused exactly in that topic. The question now is, soon we will have more prosumers. What do you think will happen with the price maker or the supply curve stack?
That depends. I was talking about disruption. You know, it depends a lot on the evolutions of the market, because as of now, these prosumers are kind of out of the market. So anyway, they are not active, right? But there are, as there are more and more of them, there might be companies that pull them together. So I have a PV on my roof, and for instance, some company gets my energy, pull it with some others, and sell it in the market, right? But as of now, it's not much of an issue. And I think as it grows anyway, there's going to be market changes. So it's very difficult to know what's going to happen, because it's going to be really depending upon the market changes.
Yeah, thanks. I will complement also. There is a question regarding the impact of P2P trading in forecasting.
I don't know who should answer. I can answer also. Peer-to-peer trading actually brings some new interesting requirements in forecasting. We talked about higher resolution in time. With peer-to-peer, that also calls for higher resolution in terms of space and assets, right? And there, as Simon already showed a nice slide, you know, thinking if you have a VPP of a renewables asset, we want to look at the sum of the asset, the aggregation, but also maybe the individual assets, and it could make sense. And I think that's more these kind of challenges that we see. And one, for instance, is also the net load. Maybe normally we forecast the load and the PV production independently, but for prosumer, it makes sense only to predict the net load directly, and maybe also the subcomponents, right? So I think the main aspects is that we're going to have some new requirements on forecasting, but also we may have also some different business models, because maybe some of the clients of Matthias, for instance, or vendors in general, are bigger companies, you know, and they have well-established needs and some very stable relationship with their vendors. But with small prosumers, it might be another game, right? Because they might just want to shop online for some forecast and change regularly their forecast users, or I don't know, have some kind of bot that is just grabbing data here and there. So I think the 2 impacts is to bring some new needs, but also to to alter the business models for forecasting. Matthias, do you agree?
Yes, and it's so this peer-to-peer trading or everything that is also with connected with prosumers or new business models. It's a very big challenge for the existing energy market and also the structures. And I think grid operators are really getting crazy about this because it's a complete change of what they are used to. For us, it's very interesting because exactly as Pierre said, these new actors and these new approaches, they really require different sorts of forecasting. For example, high resolution means that we need a kind of cheap and good forecast for households, for rooftops, but it must be precise enough to work with this. For example, in these solar homes, no, not solar home, what's it called, where you have a local prediction, which, for example, governs your household, so that the prediction still has to be good enough, but not as expensive, for example, as a commercial forecast for a trading company. So this, and we need the data. For example, it's for example, to make this distinction between the production at the DC level, so at the PV module, for example, compared to what then enters or what is fed into the grid. This also requires either good assumptions or specific data, and this is also something, because you have data protection. You cannot just hand in the data. This is also one important topic in Smart4RES, how to share data and keep privacy, and this will be an important aspect, because the more data we have as a forecaster, the better the forecast is. So this is a very interesting topic for the next years to come, I'm very sure.
Yeah, just a comment on that. Maybe Simon, you have a comment. But I'd like to say that when we first pushed towards investigating peer-to-peer markets here at DTU 6 years ago, we actually wanted what you said, Matthias. It was to be trading both data and energy as a bundle, you know, as parallel commodities. I think it's really the future. I don't know, Simon, you also had some comments on the peer-to-peer and forecasting interaction.
I think you covered most of it.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question regarding the interaction with the market architecture is, what is the role of forecasting in pay-as-bid markets, where there is no single clearing price and the bids of other market players are not known?
I don't know who should answer. Simon, do you want to answer? Or?
Now it's in the top.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't read the question. It's about the role of forecasting. You know, when the
market is pay as bid.
Is pay as bid. Well, yeah, it's a different setup of the market, which would require probably some iterative approach to do that. But it's not like forecasting is obsolete in this setup. Personally, what I've been doing is also, yes, modeling some kind of dependence between the let's say the quantity and the prices, but I'm not an expert, so maybe Pierre can dig a bit further there.
Yeah, no, so actually I'd like to say, first of all, it's the problem is the same. Even if you do pay as bid, you have to offer a certain quantity at a certain price, right? And if you're wrong with your quantity, there will also be a penalty somewhere. So the relevance of having a quantity is still there. A big difference is the price aspects, you could say, because normally as renewables, you just assume you're going to be, let's say, under the clearing price. So you're going to be automatically dispatched. While you have to offer a price, then you have to be a bit strategic in terms of the price you're going to offer to make sure that you're within the clearing somehow, right? And we know that even with uniform pricing, not pay as bid, in the future it will be more and more of a problem because we're going to have too much renewable anyway, so some will be not within the clearing. But the main difference as of today, if we're going to pay as bid, would be more that the way you're strategic with your with your pricing. The quantity would still be relevant, and the optimal quantity, though, is another optimization problem. It's not an optimal quantile in the same way anymore.
Okay, thank you very much. We move to the next question, also regarding markets. In European reserve markets, do the auction rule differentiate between unavailability from VPP based on nominal probabilistic forecast performance and unavailability from traditional power plants based on serviceability in terms of permissibility in the action and penalty cost? Too much difficult terms.
Yes, I will answer to that. So first, let me say that these the reserve markets in Europe, they are evolving. So maybe for other people who are less familiar, we can refer to the balancing guidelines from the EMSYS, which gives a good overview of what are the changes that are currently occurring and what will become commonplace in 2025, which is not so far. So to answer, so as far as I know, because I've been working on that, but this evolves very quickly. For the moment, the reserve markets don't have different rules between, let's say, a renewable VPP, VPP renewable or not, and traditional power plants. So the rules are the same for all. What has been investigated and what we did in the previous project was to make sure that a renewable actor or a VPP, which has inherent high levels of uncertainty, is able to be pre-qualified as would be the traditional power plants. So this means working with the system operators and make sure that these VPPs can actually provide the services, follow the set points with accuracy, with the only requirement that these qualification rules should allow for some limited deviations. So that's the major point. And what I know also is that there are discussions towards producing specific market conditions for ancillary services provided by non-dispatchable means. And so this is in progress, but to my knowledge, it's not finalized.
Thank you, Simon, for your answer. The next question also regards balancing markets. When estimating the financial risk of deviation for a virtual power plant, this depends a lot on the market design of balancing system, different in each country. Do you consider different modeling for different balancing market design?
Yes, that's something generally that we've been doing. So try to be as generic as possible and then adapt the methodology to different designs. Because it's true that in some markets we have, for instance, a penalty for not fulfill the reserve. In other cases, you're just out of the market. So you have to adapt your methodology. And this is one point in Smart4RES that we'll dig further, because it's true that the markets, especially on the balancing, are very different from one another. So what we're trying to do is to stay as generic as possible in the higher levels of the models, and then when we come to the case study, adapt as close as possible to the reality. The good point is, as I said before, that some of these balancing products are converging towards an harmonization at the European level, but this will be done at this horizon of 2025, and even after then there will be some differences between countries.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question also okay. How does regards the behavior of the producers? So how does this shift from production to profit-driven operation impact valuation of new plants and development? Is there a way to bring this aspect into the pre-construction process?
It's a super difficult question. I mean, it's some of the problems that have been raised, I think, already nearly 15 years ago in some countries, I would say like Denmark, Germany, and Spain, where we could already see that the increased penetration of renewables and the plans for more were going to change a lot the market dynamics. So if we stick to the same kind of valuation approaches for future assets, then it's going to be more and more tricky because we don't really understand what the price dynamics are going to be. And as I was saying, there might be disruption to the market. And that's why I think there's been also an increased interest towards, I'd say, some other approaches, you know, with auctions or some kind of hedging mechanisms or, you know, being keen on supports so that it compensates for this uncertainty in the way the market dynamics are going to evolve. And somehow reassure investors or people who are making this calculation when they look at the valuation of future assets pre-construction. Because if we only do it market driven, I mean, it's extremely difficult today.
Thank you, Pierre. Thank you for your answer. And if there is no other comments for this question, I move to the next one that say, do you think it's possible to include this probabilistic forecast in an optimal planning problem? For example, the sizing of a photovoltaic or wind turbine, or it will be too complex?
No, yes. Generally, with because these probabilistic forecasts they have been around for many years now, and actually, yes, probabilistic forecasting is not useful only for trading, obviously. So if you have, I don't know, some kind of a sizing problem or a grid management application, also the probabilistic forecast is usually very helpful to hedge against the uncertainties. Maybe I can reply and give some references if you want to read more about this. If you can do that, to give you something to read on how you can apply probabilistic forecast to different optimization problems.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Simon.
But what I would say is just one comment on this. Of course, it's the same as with the question before. If you use the uncertainty or try to use the uncertainty for the planning process, you have to keep in mind that things might change over time. So the planning process is on a very large time scale, and the revenues or the gain in revenue due to probabilistic forecasting or decision making based on probabilistic forecasting might depend on the market conditions and on the state of the art in forecasting. So in my view, it would be a bit dangerous, but maybe it's good to include aspects of it.
Thank you, Matthias. Now we move to the next question that is for Pierre. It says, for the coupled energy reserve problem, we shall then ideally consider both renewable and price uncertainties. Could it endanger the problem trackability, or are there some identified scalable optimization methods? Also, could it lead to over-conservative solution with too much uncertainty injected in the problems?
I'm sure Simon has also looked at this kind of thing. The original solution that's proposed, and I think that was the reference one also that Simon is using, you can still have a closed form solution. So it's again under a price taker assumption, right? So we know that under price taker assumption, we can make some simplifications so that it's only the relative difference in prices between reserve and energy that we care about, not all the potential scenarios for all the prices involved. So yeah. If we make simplifying assumption, sorry, Simon, you wanted to say? Or?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, if we make simplifying assumption, it's actually, I mean, it scales very nicely because we're a closed form solution. After, if we want to be more refined or break this assumption, obviously it gets more expensive. But still here, I mean, the quantity of scenarios, the dimension of the problem is not insane. I mean, it scales quite nicely, and you can use decomposition techniques for this kind of problems.
Yeah, I think you you said the most important points. I just wanted to say that sometimes you can also simplify a bit in some cases, instead of generating, you know, scenarios for energy prices and reserve prices. In some case, you are just interested in the spread, so you know, just the difference of the prices. So instead of
Exactly.
you know, you can reduce the scale of the problem already, which simplifies.
Thank you for your answer. I was muted, sorry. So then we have actually a comment from the audience that say that renewables have fixed costs, so can't be financed if they sell on a variable price market period. So you won't have renewables selling on the market because they won't be able to be built in the first place. What we need to expand renewables is not virtual power plants that are optimized under the variable cost of APEX spot, but virtual power plants that can follow a customer needs so that we can provide 24 hours PPA and get rid of the spot market. I don't know if you have a comment on that.
That's exactly in line with what I said earlier with the, you know, the valuation of assets pre-construction. I totally agree with this comment. You know, it's if we look at what's going to happen in the future, I was mentioning auctions or, you know, some kind of subsidies or support. It's in line with what is said here. I mean, in the not so distant future, it might be there's so much renewables, so much changes in dynamics and so on, that it will be too difficult to value assets, too difficult to make decisions on construction without any kind of hedging or support. And these kind of ideas, I mean, PPAs are super popular already today, and many approach will be merging some short-term market revenues and some long-term revenues based on contracts or PPAs. That's I'm not saying it's obvious, but it makes a lot of sense.
Thank you, Pierre. So we can move to the last three questions that we can group in a unique one, and we go back to the discussion on methodologies. So the audience asks if we can use the methodistic method for prediction. Which platform do you suggest for forecasting renewable energy sources, and which machine learning techniques can be used in virtual power plants?
Okay, so the meta heuristic, actually I've hinted to something what I described as a value-oriented forecasting. So this is an example of where a meta heuristic can also be interesting. So instead of tuning separately the forecasting model and so multiple forecasting models, for instance, and an optimization task, you can use meta heuristic to tune that jointly. So that's an interesting example, and we have some valid publication on this, which gives good results. On which platform you forecast, I don't know if he means if it's meant the type of languages or solutions that we should use. If it's this, we develop based on Python and R, using either existing packages or in-house developed softwares. Maybe it's also extend to services platform. In that case, I don't know. We can mention the platform, the type of services that EMSYS provide, for instance. And which machine learning can we use? I think I gave some highlights in the talk. So all the machine learning solutions that are based on decision trees work quite well, because they are able to deal with the heterogeneous levels of correlation between the inputs. So random forest and all their variations, boosting trees and all the variation work well. So I suggest starting with that before investigating neural networks. Recurrent neural networks have been popular in a period, but they are quite difficult to tune and to obtain good performances. So it should be left for more experienced users.
Yes, and maybe more generally speaking, in the state-of-the-art VPPs, so we can basically use any type of machine learning because it's a modular system. So the idea is also that, for example, in our case, that third-party modules can be linked, connected to the VPP. So I think there's a trend which is called auto trading or algo trading, where traders move away from sitting around or in front of the computer screen all day, but decisions are made by algorithms, and this is important to do this inside the VPP. So this is an ongoing process. There are already traders who are doing this, and basically this is also what we're aiming at in Smart4RES, because all these processes can or should be able to run in real time, so that every 15 minutes or whatever the market time resolution is, the decision making can be triggered by an algorithm. And concerning the second question, the platform for forecast, so what we see at the moment is that forecasting is entirely a service or provided by service providers, which means that normally they have platforms. We have our platform, our system, and normally if customers, grid operators, traders use or order forecast or contract the forecasting vendor, then they contract multiple forecasting vendors, and then they just send their forecasts. And then these different forecasts can be, for example, inside the VPP or any other platform, can be weighted with some intelligence to get a meter forecast. That is what is state of the art at the moment. And of course, that is also what we support in Smart4RES.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Matthias. So we finished the questions for the audience. I don't know if you would like to add something in the discussion. I will leave you the floor.
Nothing on my side. I think it's very nice to see there's so much interest in this topic. I think it's something that started, I think, 20 years ago, this focus on trading renewables. And it's very nice. There's so much to consider. And there were some very good questions, about, conceptually, philosophically also, how should we change completely our approach to pricing or to defining revenues for these assets. So I think it's a super exciting topic and exciting times in this field.
Yes, I fully agree. This is an ongoing process. Things are changing rapidly, and it's always interesting. And we only touched several topics today, but there's really more to come. And so thank you everybody for these questions and the discussion.
Yes, don't hesitate to get in touch with us via LinkedIn, ResearchGate, Twitter, and we'll have more episodes on this subject of training. So stay tuned for these developments where we can dig a bit further in these questions.
Yes, thank you, Matthias. Thank you, Simon. And thank you, Pierre, for your presentation, for this webinar, and for your kindness in answering to all the questions that, reveal the interest of the people and the relevance of the topic. So I would like to thank you, and thank you also the audience for attending this webinar. Now the webinar is closed, and I would like also to invite you to the last webinar of this season that will be tomorrow, and it will focus on a regulatory sandbox. So thank you everybody. Thank you, Matthias. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Pierre. Thank you, Smart4RES. See you soon. Bye.
Yeah, thank you too. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.